Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Career Coach podcast. Today, we have another amazing guest on the show, and this show is all about uncovering tips and tools from young professionals in their late 20s and their early 30s that can help college students get insights, get experience, get knowledge that can give them guidance along their career journey. I really struggled to get this kind of information when I was in college. I went to Yale, I worked on Wall Street. And now my passion is to help students be successful. And so this show is all about extracting value, extracting insights, and sharing them with you. So grab a pen and paper and take notes, and feel free to get in touch with us afterwards. Enjoy the show. Okay, so welcome to the first episode of the Career Coach.
Thanks. Excited to be here and honored to be the first person you're speaking with.
Yeah. I've been wanting to do this podcast for a long time. And, I've noticed how many students have been asking us for career advice and just want to chat to people who are doing well in their careers and learn from them. So I'm super excited to get your stories, get your insights, and just pass that on to the younger generation.
Great. Hopefully I can help guide some people.
I'm sure you can. Okay, well, I think a good place to start is just to kind of give a little bit of the background, where you went to school, what did you study, and the journey of how you got to where you are today, what you're actually doing right now.
Yeah. So I grew up in New York City. I went to college at the University of Michigan. And there I ended up studying business, but I kind of stumbled upon business. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with my life. I actually grew up doing a lot more kind of creative pursuits like art. And so it wasn't very clear for me. I feel like a lot of people at the Michigan Business School were very clearly like going into consulting or finance. For me, I just liked economics. I liked this like management side of things. And so I thought that there could be some good opportunities from it. And throughout my first few years, we can dive into any of these. I had a number of different internships, kind of like when you're a freshman, sophomore, getting anything that like anyone who will pay you or not to do an internship to build up your resume. And my third summer was when I did iXperience. And that was really powerful for me because I didn't want to go into traditional like finance or straight consulting. At least I didn't think I did. I liked the more tech side of things. I liked doing, I really always liked data and data analysis, and I wasn't sure maybe I want to be a developer or something that kind of fuses the two. And so iXperience really kind of opened up a lot of opportunities for me the summer after, where I was pretty sure I didn't want to be a developer. I think I wrote a blog post about this like 10 years ago for you guys. But what it enabled me to see is like this intersect of tech, startups, and business. And so I ended up starting my career in venture capital. Also kind of stumbled across that industry, didn't know much about it, but knew that I was interested in early stage startups. I really liked my experience at iXperience, and thought that was kind of like made me a unique profile. And so I spent my first kind of 2.5 years in my career working at Insight Partners, which is a growth stage venture capital fund focused on software investments. And I really liked parts of Insight. We can dive into this. But I knew I never really wanted to be an investor long term. What I wanted was to be able to identify a startup that I could see was going to be successful and kind of find a really interesting like business strategy type of role there. So then after a couple years being there, I felt it was my time to go to more of the operator side. And I also decided, you know what, if I'm going to switch industries, I'm also going to switch countries. So I ended up moving to London and starting at Palantir. So for people who don't know Palantir, it is a kind of end-to-end data management company, so focused on enabling governments and large enterprises to run their businesses, leveraging their data and AI to kind of make data-driven business decisions. I've still at Palantir today, and I'm still in London today. So that's about 5.5 years later, which I think for like millennial times is a very long time to be in a job.
It is.
But I've
It is.
stayed, yeah, I've stayed in it because Palantir is such a broad company that I've been able to jump around kind of like areas of focus, both industry wise, but also kind of role wise, and build a really nice career for myself, at least thus far, in this really interesting space that is, especially now with the advent of AI, is a really trendy kind of hot place to be with data and AI. And I specifically now work across our life sciences practice. So focusing on kind of overseeing our implementations with life science customers and mostly like big pharmaceuticals, but also spend some time kind of growing that portfolio with outreach and building kind of our strategy and offerings around that. And
Wow,
yeah,
that's a
that kind of
journey,
brings me to where I am today. Don't know if that was too long or
No, that was
short.
perfect. That was
Okay,
perfect.
good.
I have so many questions. I have so many questions. So I think the first question is, for people out there who don't know what venture capital really is, maybe you can talk through like, you know, what is venture capital and what kind of like skills do you need to be good at it?
Yeah, so I also really didn't know what venture capital was at all. So I would put it under like the broader asset class of private equity. So in private equity, you have kind of three major stages, maybe you can call it four. So at the largest side, you have traditional private equity. That's going to be very heavy kind of financial modeling. These are large buyouts or maybe take privates of large enterprises, and is much more, kind of on the financial engineering side of things. Then the next stage is, I'm going kind of largest to smallest. The next stage is growth stage, and that is that kind of in between scale up company. So it's already got product market fit, it's quite established, but maybe you're leading it up to the IPO. And so that's a nice mix of investing in companies that are large enough that you have data and kind of traction to make your investment decision off of, but there's still actually a lot of like growth and strategy behind it. And then you get to the earlier stage bucket, which is, I would even just like loop in pre-seed all the way up to like Series A, Series B. And that is where you're investing maybe in just founders or in an idea. And it's much more about, I'd say, the riskiest asset class there, but much more about kind of relationship management, identifying opportunities, and founders that you think are going to be really successful, but don't necessarily have a product or product market fit yet. So where I was in that middle stage of growth because I like making decisions based off of data. It felt a bit safer for me, but I also like that kind of like strategy and can we help grow these companies outside of just a financial engineering aspect of it.
Great. Yeah, that's the perfect way to describe it. And so for students who are thinking of going into venture capital post college, what should they be doing early on in their summers or on the side to prepare themselves or to set themselves up to be successful in this kind of career?
Yeah, so there's not, well, I don't know now, but when I was recruiting, so that was maybe, oh my gosh, like 8 or 9 years ago. That's like scary. But for venture capital, there weren't that many funds that would hire right out of undergrad. So the main way that people got into venture capital, really early stage or later stage, was by working in investment banking for 2 3 years and then making the hop to buy side. Um, then Insight was kind of like founded this sourcing model that enabled new grads from university without a banking or investment background to work in venture capital, which was an amazing opportunity. And I think that that model has grown a lot. Now I feel like I know more and more people who've gotten to venture capital without needing to have that banking experience before. And so the focus is on sourcing, honestly pretty similar to like a sales type of role. So you are looking for companies to invest in, and that means that you are researching different markets, different types of companies out there. You are networking and meeting a bunch of different founders. Um, and you're kind of like up with an investment thesis for which companies you think that the fund should invest in, and then there'll be a diligence process. And so the skill sets that I think are important for this is like you're very entrepreneurial in your own way, and like you have a hustle. So being able to show experiences where you created your own opportunity, or where you kind of like took a large risk and created kind of like a unique background for yourself. So I know a lot of VCs like former founders, whether you started something in when you're in college, or even kind of like starting and running a club at college could be really interesting for them. They also love athletes because they're really competitive. It's a very, very competitive role. It's a very kind of individual, you build your own portfolio role, at least at Insight, where that's like really this like well-oiled machine model. I think at smaller funds, they might be a little bit more collaborative in that way, but they definitely look for like high degree of competitiveness in people and internal drive. And yeah, I think like really just having a interesting, unique background, showing a deep interest in tech and startups. So I think that's what helped me a lot was going to iXperience. And before that, I had an internship at a startup. And so it was very easy for me to tell the story of why I was interested in investing and working with startups, because I had previous background of working at different startups in various different roles, and then obviously having that business background to complement it, I think made me stand out a bit more as a candidate versus maybe people who have a more traditional background. That's harder to make that kind of connection with.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I like how you touch on starting something, building a club, starting a business, even if it fails. That initiative and that drive to get something off of the ground is always going to be helpful on your resume. It's going to show that you're someone who takes risks, is willing to put themselves out there, and is sort of active and not just passive, in terms of building skill set. So that's great. And yeah, interesting about the athletes. I was an athlete in college and I was very competitive. And
Was it squash? Am I remembering correctly?
yeah, squash. I played for Yale's squash team, and I was an All-American actually. But one of the things that squash taught me was how to be disciplined. You know, how to train and how to wake up early and how to be consistent in my habits, to ultimately get better. And I think in industry, that is recognized as an asset for someone who can demonstrate consistent discipline to train.
100%. Yeah. And the athletes were always the most disciplined at Insight. I mean, their ability to just grind it out, I was always so impressed.
So how was your transition from college to your first job? And I'm sure it was pretty stressful. I mean, I know from my own experience moving to New York City and starting a job at a hedge fund, having no real experience in the space and having to wake up early and work long hours, take the subway every day. And I felt it was quite stressful for me. And there was a big adaptation process in terms of changing my lifestyle and, looking after my mental health. How did you manage that transition, and what were some of the biggest sort of insights you had once you started your first job?
So I had a really nice transition because basically I had an extra semester at school because I I didn't know I wanted to do business until later in college. So I kind of was like left back a year at University of Michigan and had to like finish up my core classes in a final semester, which ended up being a blessing. When it for like it was a big decision for me to make to like extend my school time. But it was nice because Insight had an analyst class. So there was like a set start date, but I graduated in December. And so I always knew I wanted to go to the operational side. So I said, perfect. Do you have a portfolio company that I could intern for 6 months until the analyst program starts? And they ended up finding, they'd never done this before. Now I think it's like a formal program, which is cool. But they ended up finding me a job as a data analyst at one of the portfolio companies called Spot Hero, which is a marketplace for off-street parking. So parking your car in parking garages, which is actually a really big challenge in the US and particularly New York City. And so basically you have this app and you can find kind of the prices and availability of different parking lots nearby. And they usually have deals and stuff like that. And that was awesome because it was fairly low pressure. Like I knew I wasn't trying to work there full time. But I came in as like their investor. So everyone from the get-go was really excited to have me and like really looked up to me in a way where I'm like, I don't have any real work experience, like I've had a major imposter syndrome around that, but they're like, oh, as an investor, what do you think about this? Not an investor yet, but it was really great because I had 6 months where I got to challenge myself technically because I kind of casted myself as a data analyst and wasn't actually a data analyst, and got to learn some kind of hard, quote unquote, technical skills. Got to get exposure to a successful early stage business and what that kind of like growth stage momentum looks like, and got to just have fun with this team. And that was a really nice transition into the workforce. By the end of the internship, I was really sad to leave it, but I also was like ready to hit the ground running at Insight as more of a full-time analyst, where I'm looking to drive my career in that way. And I had also interned at Insight the previous summer, so about 50-50 split of people who had interned there and who were coming for the first time. But I felt like I had this kind of leg up in a way because I knew the deal with Insight. I had interned there. I understood a lot of even just like the nomenclature and the culture. And I had worked with a portfolio company, so I already had some kind of operational experience in that way to understand startups. But actually, the transition for me at Insight was pretty difficult. And took a toll on my mental health, less from like, going from college where I get to sleep late and like have a couple classes a day, but it's like pretty chill. And now I'm in this intense work environment. Like I could handle working hours and the intensity, but sourcing was just so not for me. I felt a lot of pressure to find companies and they basically like, they put a lot of focus on like how many calls you get and how many meetings you schedule a week, and you're on Salesforce and you're like ranked against your peers. And I really like things that are in my control. And I felt like this was not in my control because, how many founders were going to answer me and like would their companies be interesting in the right stage, and they were raising, and it was like so many things that I couldn't control that had to work out. And actually it's not like the partners put any pressure on me or anyone, like that's kind of why they push the quantity number, because they know. But that model of kind of this like sales quota was just not good for my mental health and the way that I like to work. So after I managed to do something really great for myself, which was I was on a team that did some buyouts. And so we were acquiring this very large company where the strategy was M&A. And I just like made myself the M&A person, where at least then it was very targeted. And I actually got to do a lot of like analytical diligence instead of doing the straight sourcing. And so once I was doing that, I had this kind of protection from like just always doing outreach, and that helped my mental health a lot. I ended up actually switching from the investment team after that to the on-site team, which is more like portfolio management and diligence, which was a better fit for me if I were to stay in investing.
Interesting. So I'm assuming that at Michigan, things were very competitive. Everyone's trying to get jobs in the business school, and it sounds like you sort of delayed your job sort of commitment by a whole semester. And I'm sure all your friends had these sexy investment bank jobs or in consulting, and that must have also been quite stressful. And I've noticed from a lot of students that I speak to, there's this anxiety that develops if they haven't gotten their job immediately, or haven't secured that offer letter. This sounds like what happened to you. You must have gone through some experience like that where you were maybe doubting yourself against your peers, or maybe I'm wrong, but did that happen to you at all?
Well, it was kind of nice that I wasn't in the same class as my friends, because I was kind of like a year behind. So in that way, it was nice because I always felt like I had more time than them. And I knew I didn't want to I did like one or two investment banking interviews, and it was just like so clear that was not going to be my path. First of all, I need my 8 to 9 hours. So like from there, I was like, I don't know, staying up till 2, 3 a.m. working. Like, I don't think that's going to be good for me. So I always knew I was probably going to do something a little bit more alternative. But definitely like looking for jobs is stressful. Interviewing is stressful. And I feel like it's gotten earlier and earlier at college. I mean, I don't know the latest, but by the time I was graduating, I felt like the freshmen were like recruiting for what their junior year internship would be.
They are. It has
It's
become
crazy
earlier and earlier.
because like you don't know what you want to do, and you literally have zero experience to be able to kind of like tell your story. So it's really just kind of like the few classes you've taken and how well you've done in them. I feel like for me, it was nice because I had a couple summers where I got to explore different types of jobs and different opportunities. And that also just made my resume a little bit more interesting. Um, but I mean, I feel for these freshmen who are out there recruiting for jobs they have no idea if they want to do, and they're signing themselves up for it.
Yeah, that's why this podcast is going to be critical, because if you listen to more and more people talking about their experience and what they're doing, it can at least help you understand, the different types of career paths that are available, the different jobs. I mean, the world is a very big place, and there's so many opportunities that you can explore, but you need to have that knowledge. You need to be able to connect to, people in their late 20s, early 30s that can at least share their experiences and their advice with you. So hopefully this helps the listeners. Maybe you can talk about, if you were to go back and give yourself advice in college, if you had to go speak to the freshman Mikenzie or the sophomore Mikenzie and just give like 3 great pieces of advice that are related to your career, because obviously you know a lot more now than you did then. What are some of the things you would tell her?
Yeah, I think one is to your point, like there's a lot more paths than what maybe, especially if you're like in a business school or kind of like going more in like a traditional path than those might outline for you or highlight for you. So obviously, like there's just so many startups and tech companies out there that I feel like they're harder to find because it's just much more obvious when you have JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs recruiting on your campus. But if those don't feel like the right jobs for you, there are a ton of alternatives. And so like don't maybe put pressure on yourself that you need to follow a specific path that you see your peers going down. Um, so I think that's one. I think networking is incredibly important. It's something that actually I really want to improve upon sometimes, like especially because I've been at Palantir for so long, like you're always more motivated to network when you're like looking for a job or a new opportunity and you're like, oh, who's in my network that I should reach out to. But I think like the more you can build up your network and like a team or like kind of a group of mentors as well, that is really helpful, not just for opening up opportunities, which it really does, but also just for learning about what different industries look like and kind of what different career paths can look like. So, like looking for interesting people within your LinkedIn network or something where you're really fascinated by their career path and reaching out and getting a coffee. I've always been so surprised by how generous people are with their time, just like reaching out cold, particularly if you write a good cold outreach message. If it's very generic, you're less likely to get answers. But if you put some time into it, I think you'd be surprised by how much time people are willing to give you and how much they're willing to kind of help connect you as well. It's always kind of like one leads to the next.
Yeah, yeah. Just to add to that, I agree with you 100% about networking. I think it's incredibly valuable, and it is something that's in your control. If you learn how to use LinkedIn, and you start seeing people with similar interests that maybe were in the same college as you, or the same sports team, or the same club, and you just send a friendly message being like, "Hey, I could really use some advice on X, Y, and Z. Do you have 20 minutes to chat? Or I'm really interested in this career path. Do you mind having a chat?" It's amazing how many people are open to that. And every time you have one of these conversations, you're now on their radar. You might get a really valuable piece of advice that you never had before. And so I think a good system for a college student who wants to be really successful and create opportunities for themselves, they should be having 2 or 3 of these short mini networking calls a week. Over the course of a year, you're going to build an incredible network, and it just takes 1 or 2 people to say, "Hey, have you thought about doing this career?" And suddenly a whole new opportunity opens up for you. And I think that's a great way to really sort of expand what they call your luck factor. Everyone will always say, "Oh, you were lucky because you got this great job," and in the background you're like, "Well, yeah, I did email like 50 people and have 30 conversations, and then I got this job." They often don't see what happens in the background. So I think that's a really good, solid piece of advice that college students should embrace as another way to improve their odds of success in their careers. So yeah, great one. I think that's something I encourage students to do all the time, and especially if they can get a mentor. If they can get somebody to agree to meet them once a month for just an hour and have a chat about life. Every time I've spoken to my mentor, and when I was younger, I asked someone who I never thought was going to be my mentor. He was the CEO of a massive company, and he was like, "Sure, I'll be your mentor. We just meet once a month, and you can come with some questions, and I'll do my best to answer them." The nuggets of wisdom that he was able to give me, I would have never got from any book or any podcast, because he was so wise. And that was one of the best things that I did was get a mentor early on. Okay. I'd love to transition a little bit to your current role. I've kind of left that because I think it's probably top of mind for you, and Palantir is a really cool company that probably a lot of students haven't even heard of. But maybe you can talk about the company, what it does, and then let's focus on your specific role, because one of the things I'd love students to understand is, how do you work at a company like Palantir in the first place? And then what are the types of jobs? Like, what are the different opportunities that are available to students if they, have studied anything from art to maths to science? Is it a company that has lots of opportunities? Just talk through your experience there and see it through the eyes of a student who might think about maybe wanting to work at a company like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I described it a bit before, but yeah, Palantir is a really interesting company because it's a very large, very important tech company. So we work with most Western governments and some of the largest enterprises in the world, helping them to use our software to leverage their data, um, and basically be able to drive business operations on top of their data. And so the challenge point that Palantir is trying to solve through a number of different software products that we have is basically, especially for large companies, you have so many different kind of source systems for your data. They all live in siloed areas across the organization and across geographies. And this is due to technical limitations, but also governance limitations of maybe like access control restrictions. And so our software enables you to basically have that kind of centralized data asset that is modeled to represent your business world. And then you have like workflows, like you could even think of like Power BI type dashboards or even kind of like project management workflows, but built on top of your data rather than needing to input a kind of new source system on top of it. Palantir is a really secretive company, so that's why most people don't know about it. A lot of our work is confidential, especially with the government. It's becoming more and more well known, especially, like I said, with this kind of new wave of AI with ChatGPT and LLMs generally. We have a lot of AI capabilities on the platform, and the most important thing to enable AI to actually work is your data. So we're very well positioned for this, and it's cool to see kind of the company gain traction and more people hear about Palantir because of this, because I'm like, we've been doing this for years. It's just that now it's sexy. So now people start to know about it. So that's a bit of context about the company. How did I get the job? So my network. I was looking for operational jobs. I was particularly looking in London. I thought I wanted to go to an earlier stage startup, but I actually found that even though I was working in BC, it was still very hard for me, A, to know like what my role would be at a startup, and B, for me to really find a startup that was like a good fit for me and that I had high conviction in it being successful. I still kind of wanted a lot of mentorship at a larger company because I hadn't worked in an operational role before. So I was talking to a friend who had left Insight about my predicament of like, I don't know what I want to do. I'm interviewing at all these companies. But yeah, like I'm not really sure that they're the right fit for me. But I don't want to go to like a big kind of more corporate company, even like a Google. Like I just wasn't that interested in that. And he's like, you got to work at Palantir. My wife works there. And I was like, what's Palantir? And he's like, you don't know Palantir? And it goes in the thing of, the pitch of Palantir and how it's this secret covert company. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds perfect because I've always loved working with data. Everything I described about why I struggled with investing was like I didn't have the answers. I didn't have the data to make decisions. So I was like, this is the perfect company for me. Still didn't really know what my role would be, but through my friend, I got connected with the head of HR, and luckily kind of got fast. Once you get a referral, you can get fast tracked to an interview. And I interviewed actually for an internal role that doesn't really exist anymore. I didn't end up getting that role, but it was more of like a strategy and operations role, kind of like an internal consultant. I thought that was a good fit for me because of my background. Most of the other roles at Palantir, you require a technical background. So almost everyone that I work with, in at least the business development, like implementation side of things, is an engineer to some degree. So I ended up interviewing fully for this internal role, and they were like, great, we want to hire you, but actually we think this other role is a better fit for you, which is called site reliability operations. Palantir likes to be super confusing with the titles of things. They don't really mean anything, but it's more about kind of like running and like project managing or program managing implementations. So like instead of developing the use case in our software like the engineers do, you're managing the team of engineers and the client relationships, and trying to build that kind of that portfolio. Our contracts are quite large, so a small one would probably be, I mean, it's changed a bit, but when I joined, a small contract would probably be 10 million. So it's kind of like consulting style. You usually have a team of at least 4 or 5 engineers working on the project. So yeah, I joined under that role. I had no idea if it would be a good fit. Ended up working out well, and I can kind of talk to that transition phase. But other roles are kind of like, how do you get into Palantir? I want to make sure I hit on. That was just my story. If you're an engineer, great. It's very straightforward. You apply to be a forward deployed engineer. Or if you have a technical background, maybe in like the sciences or more kind of like mechanical engineering, so not straight computer science. There's a role called deployment strategist that also you have to be somewhat technical, but that one's a bit more about kind of like the client-facing relationship strategy side of things. So pretty similar to my role. If you're not technical, site reliability operations, if you're like organized, good with clients, good with teams, usually we don't hire right out of undergrad, but a couple years experience. There's like 1 or 2 people that have, so shouldn't deter you from applying for that role. And then there's a lot of internal roles, and they're building out more and more of these that are more, focused on like content strategy, marketing, HR, and those type of things. So I'd say the most straightforward way is being technical as an engineer, but there are other opportunities, mostly kind of like internal functions or program management, technical program managers, that are open to non-technical folks as well.
And are you involved in any of the recruitment processes? And if you are, often students come to me and they ask me for advice on their resume. How can I stand out? I'm just a resume in a pile of resumes. Is there anything specific that students can think about as they sort of craft their resumes?
I am involved in recruiting, so I interview. I'd say like the best way to get an interview, especially at a large company that is, you are going to be a pile of resumes, is get a referral. And so if you don't know someone at the company, once again, write a good LinkedIn message to someone. Maybe you're all like someone who went to the same school as you, your alma mater, or just someone who you think you could have a good conversation with, or like you were interested in their background. And usually people will take the call. A lot of companies have referral programs, so they're financially motivated for you to get the job, and they can help kind of coach you throughout it, especially larger companies at least. For your resume, I mean, I would tailor it as much to the type of role that you're trying to get as possible. But I think just like showing clear ownership, clear growth. It's hard when it's only an internship. So obviously you kind of have to embellish. But if you think about like individual projects that you've worked on and kind of like what your impact was on them and the ownership that you had on them, that's something that I look at a lot. And I think to like the part of advice before that should give people some solace is like, it's almost, I'm at least, and I'm maybe biased, but like I'm always more interested by candidates who have a non-traditional background. So they, worked at an early stage startup, or they started something, or didn't necessarily go down like the traditional path. I feel like when I was in school, it's very important to like have certain milestones or like names on your resume. But actually, I feel like now people are way more open to people who just have like unique skill sets and opportunities. So even like showing you've taken a course like iXperience or something like that, like people appreciate that and they notice it, even if it's not like tangible work experience.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are some really great little pieces of advice for someone that is looking to come work at this company or any company in general. I wanted to get your take on AI. I know a lot of students are sort of thinking about AI and its impact on the workplace and its impact on them and their futures. Obviously using tools to improve their resumes and to do work for them. It is sort of seems like it's here to stay and that it's getting better and better as each day progresses. You're in one of the top companies that is working with AI and data. You must have an interesting insight and some perspective on the next 5 years and how is this going to impact careers and what should students be doing to prepare themselves for what could be potentially a relatively big change in how the world functions.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think a lot of people are thinking about this. Um, I would say to start working at a company that does AI. We're not there yet. So, like, don't think you're recruiting for a job now and you're not going to get this job because an AI took your job. Actually, LLMs are incredibly powerful, but there's a lot of limitations to them right now. And both from a technical perspective, but also from a governance perspective of just like how do we ensure that the AI is reliable in fully automating tasks. I think we're quite far away from that. What I've been seeing a lot of Palantir, where we kind of see good use cases for it, is something that you have a lot of data on. For LLMs, obviously documents, but for traditional AI, could be tabular data. And B, especially for LLMs, like nothing that is mission critical. So things that are highly repetitive, kind of like admin intensive. So sifting through a bunch of SOPs to figure out, I'm thinking of like supply chain use case, but like to figure out, okay, what is the right way to like repair and maintain this piece of equipment, for example, where traditionally they have to go through a bunch of different documents, maybe search through their emails, check what the latest regulation is for this SOP to find the right SOP. Things like that. That's a really good use case for AI and LLM. But to take it a step further and replace people's jobs where you're fully automating even just something like that, I think we're very far away because if you've heard of the term hallucinations, which just means like the model is making something up because they don't have the answer, that is still very common. And if you were to fully automate something without having a human in the loop on it, that is incredibly dangerous for, a lot of different industries. So I still think we have a number of years before we really see AI replacing humans in the workforce. And sadly, it will probably always start with the like offshore low paying jobs. So customer service is probably going to be like, I would think, one of the first places that companies could start cutting jobs for AI. So I think more strategic jobs, that'll be much harder. But I think there's also a lot of really exciting things about AI, even when you think about it replacing certain jobs. Think about the time that people have saved now from the annoying admin tasks, or just like thinking about like, oh, I have to like write this email. How do I craft it in the right way? Having an LLM do a lot of that work that takes a lot of time and not necessarily the creativity. That is the exciting part of the job. That leaves a lot more space and time for employees to be a lot more productive and do the more creative work. So I think that side is really exciting.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree with you. There's sort of like this, we're close, but we're far feeling when it comes to the real technical stuff of AI.
Well, I also just feel like the marketing of AI, and like you go on Twitter and you see like these VCs and stuff, and they're like, it's like this company is already changing the way that we do X. And then like you like download it and use it and you're like, wait, this doesn't really work, which is like totally fair. But it's like there's a lot of hype that like LLMs fully work today and are like automating things today. And that's like I'm pretty convinced in most cases that is not true yet. And it shouldn't be, because there should always be a human in the loop right now.
Okay, on to a different kind of a topic. We've probably got two quick things I want to cover. But I'm a big fan of learning and growing and continuously trying to see new perspectives, reading books, reading podcasts. Listening to podcasts. Is there any particular book or thing that has happened, learning experience you've had that has just had a dramatic impact on you? I know a few that have had on me, but I'm just curious if there's like that one book that that had an impact on your life.
I'm definitely going to have a recency bias. I must admit that I'm more of a fiction novel reader than I am a nonfiction business reader. I feel like I spend my whole day like working and thinking about business and things like that, that actually um, sometimes it's refreshing, yeah, to just read a fiction book. But I like mental health and personal wellness and creativity a lot. For me, that's like the best way I can grow myself in my career. And I just read Rick Rubin's new book. It's
The
called The
Creative
Creative
Act.
Act, A Way of Being.
Yes, I've also just read it.
Honestly, it's so good. I love him. And now I like watch the 60 Minutes about him. I'm like listening to all these podcasts and I'm like, this is who I want to be. Like, I just think
Amazing.
these type of things, yeah, he's amazing. Um, Books like that, where it's not like, here's how you learn like this hard skill, but it's much more about like a mindset shift. And yeah, changing your perspective about things are so impactful. And so I really liked this book where it's like, you think that it's going to be, oh, I'm going to learn how to be creative. And no, it's like, okay, learn how to meditate, learn how to like play and explore new things, learn how to trust your gut on things. And that for me is so much more applicable to both my career, but all aspects of my life. So I really enjoyed reading that one.
Yeah, he seems like such a wise man with so much knowledge to share. Every day I read a few pages, I'm like, wow, that is almost genius in some way. So I highly encourage everyone to get a copy of this book. It's quite a big book, but it's a very easy sort of soft read in a way. Okay, then in terms of energy levels, I've always found that you need a lot of energy to give your best. And obviously in college, I slept very little, went out a lot, played a lot of sports. I wasn't really looking after myself necessarily. Now I realize I have to, in order to bring 100% to everything I do, to be present. Um, and I kind of wish I knew a little bit more about this when I was in college. I probably would have performed better in the things that I did. But do you have some kind of routine or things you do to, give you the best levels of energy that you can, whether that's types of diet or any biohacking type things? What do you do in your life to keep yourself high energy?
Yeah. I'm not a biohacker, but I've always been an incredibly routine person and needed my sleep and my like wellness things. So even through college, I think I was actually pretty good at this. Um, so yeah, first of all, at least 8 hours. It's for like everyone's sake. No one wants to talk to me when I have less than 8 hours. Certainly, my partner feels that way. Um, and I actually, in the past year, have like finally really found my routine. So I've been meditating on and off since college. And I actually remember I experienced a few people had done the Vipassana. I think it was Zach, I forget his last name. And that was one of the things that first piqued my interest about meditation. I did like one course about it, but I was never able to really find a way for it to work for me. I've struggled with anxiety pretty much my whole life. So I was always looking, like, that's why wellness stuff was like never a choice. I always needed to find things to make sure that I could keep my energy high and my stress levels low. But in the past year, I've really tapped into meditation as a practice that has honestly changed my stress levels and my energy levels in a way that feels really kind of fundamental and substantial. So I meditate every morning. I try to move my body in some way. So like I do like Pilates, or I go for a walk, or I bike to work. So even that is nice. And then I've been journaling as well, which I find really helpful to just kind of download for the day, both in the morning and then in the evening, kind of like have some reflection on how the day went and what I want to.
That's a really good system. That's a really good system. I
Yeah.
think journaling is amazing for processing your emotions. So if you're feeling like very overwhelmed and you just write it down, it sort of like gets it out of your head onto a page and you can sort of manage it a bit better. But I think meditating is such a key to keeping your stress levels down, but it's quite hard to maintain a
It's incredibly hard. That's why I'm saying on and off, and I've been mostly off, but now I feel like I've tapped it.
you use any kind of app or are you just kind of sitting still?
So I've used some of the apps before, and like I used Headspace, but that I wasn't able to like really get into it. I also done like two different meditation courses. One's called Transcendental Meditation, which like all the top
Oh,
CEOs
right.
and
Yeah.
executive recommend TM. I did that one for about like a year, and I also that one's a big time commitment. So it's like 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. There's all these rules around it. I did mindful based stress reduction, MBSR, which is basically kind of like breath, like focusing on different parts of your body. But what really helped me, I would say now, is learning breath work, which is now becoming like a very trendy thing. But there's a few like breathwork apps, or I would recommend like finding a breathwork instructor that kind of guides you through it. And that enabled me to like tap into like, what does it mean when you're in a meditative state or in like a different state of being? I never like really got there before, and this enabled me to, where I was like, okay, I need to get there. And then I was like slowly able to get there. But you have to like keep going. It's tough.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like a sport in a way where you've
Yeah.
got to put your 30 minutes aside and train. And the benefit, I think, if a college student was to start meditating and doing breath work daily, if they hadn't done it before, I think the outcome of that would be the ability to plan better just because you're less stressed, and the ability to be more present in, say, a job interview and to be more calm if your cortisol levels rise because you get a difficult question. You get to be able to manage that part of your nervous system better, and that all those things are sensed by someone who's interviewing you. They can sort of feel how you feel, and if you're super stressed, they kind of pick that up. If you're calm and relaxed, it kind of makes them feel like you're in control, which I think is um, it's a good thing to be able to do when you're in an interview. So I encourage people to at least try it. I know I didn't meditate at all during college. I kind of wish that I had. And I've also done some breath work recently using an app called Othership, which has these really cool like breath work sessions. They range from 5 minutes to 15 minutes to an hour. And I find that just doing that does give you quite a nice start to the day, because physiologically also you just fill yourself with oxygen. Kind of makes sense. I think people often when they get stressed, they actually forget to breathe in some way. They're these short, shallow breaths that don't give them enough oxygen. Okay, so yeah, I mean, just to wrap that up, I think focusing on ensuring that you are looking after your vitality and your energy levels is going to impact your ability to perform well and to find good opportunities for yourself. It's often underlooked. I think in college, people stay awake late, drinking coffee at 10 p.m. at night to write that extra bit of paper, but forgetting that a good night's sleep of 8 hours is actually going to have massive impact on your ability to do tasks the next day. It doesn't make sense, but the science is pointing more and more to sleep being so important to a human being. I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but I feel like we just don't do it enough.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so yeah, that kind of brings us to the end of this episode. It was amazing to hear all about your journey and also to see you again. I haven't seen you in 10 years, so it's nice to connect. Very nice to connect. I didn't know you were in London. I didn't know you were working at Palantir, so I've really enjoyed this conversation and just sort of reconnecting and hearing about how you're doing. And thank you for sharing all those tips with the students who are going to be listening to this. I'm going to put it into a newsletter, try summarize it so that there'll also be a newsletter that people can subscribe to, where you can kind of just click on the different links and the tips that you've shared, and maybe even link to Palantir so they can see where the job applications are. But yeah, thanks so much for your time. And yeah, I look forward to following your journey into the future and having you back in a year or two to see where you've gone. What is your big dream for the next 2 or 3 years?
Oh, I have been trying to figure that out. So I'm getting married this summer. So
Wow,
a
congrats.
lot of my, thank you, focus has been getting all of that sorted. And actually, my fiance is Danish from Copenhagen. So I think the next step for us is moving there next year. And so that leaves a lot of questions. Luckily, Palantir has an office there, and because I work on life sciences, we have Novo Nordisk, and some of the best pharma companies in Europe are based in Denmark. So that helps my move there. But it's hard now. It's a weird time where it's hard to kind of dream and vision things because I have so much transition coming, and it's really exciting. But I'm actually trying to focus on really enjoying and being present in my time in London, because, I feel like the move is going to come faster than I even expect, even though it's probably like a year and a half away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's so exciting. Yeah, good luck to moving to Denmark. That's a big thing.
Yeah.
And that's a wrap. What an amazing episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please don't forget to go onto the Spotify link, like and subscribe to the podcast, maybe leave a review. And if you want to see the video, you can go to the YouTube channel and watch it over there. But the best part of all is the newsletter. So every week we send out a newsletter, the Career Coach newsletter. This will give you access to additional information, show notes, tutorials, book reviews. So I highly recommend that you sign up and subscribe to the newsletter. And as always, feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions, and see you soon on the next episode.